sporting contest discussion on drugs and bionics and advancing sport. My name is David Bowden, and it's excited to be your chair for this afternoon. I'm also the Battle Satellite Coordinator from the Institute of Ideas and TV columnist Online. Since the Sean Merrick ruling at the start of this month overturned the IOC's Rule 45, which prevented athletes who had been previously barred for doping from competing in next year's Olympics, it is safe to say that drug teams will be competing at London in 2012. However, there's a great number of commentators who observed that we knew as much as that in 2008 and previously, that doping is increasingly right, while the definition of what constitutes banned substances grows ever broader, and the attempts to regulate athletes' intake of them become ever more stringent and intrusive. Meanwhile, the debate over the Blade Runner are so historious, and the observation that Team GB seems to only excel in high-tech sports have placed the term performance enhancement firmly under the microscope. In keeping with the theme of this whole strand of debate in the sporting context, there's a lot going on in terms of what we look at sport for, how it relates to broader society, and how this will play out in 2012. I've amassed an excellent panel to try and give us some of the insights into what is an incredibly nuanced and ambiguous discussion with a lot of grey area. And I'm giving them only 3 minutes to start off their introductions, which is not very much time, but will enable us to have more discussion amongst us in the panel before I go out to the audience. But I'll introduce them also in the order that they'll speak. And I'll just give a very brief summary of their biographies. You can check out full details on the Battle Ideas website. Sat to my immediate left, I have Dr. David James, who is a senior lecturer in sports engineering at Sheffield Hallam University. Not only is he a world-leading researcher into his field, but as a public communication fellow at the Royal Academy of Engineering, who also are partners on this session. He is a leading science communicator. So I'm delighted to have him with us, and delighted to have the Royal Academy of Engineering as our partners. Sat to my immediate right, we have John Cooper, QC, who is a barrister at 25 Bedford Road and visiting professor of law at Cardiff University. He has represented a number of sports people, including the Olympics athlete Katerina Farrow. Presently, he is also the legal advisor to Occupy LSX, who are camped outside St. Paul's Cathedral. In yesterday's meeting, we were supposed to have Charles Fraser, the Canon Chancellor of St. Paul's, speaking at a session, but decided to withdraw due to his involvement in the protest, and of course, the no longer Canon Chancellor of St. Paul's. So hopefully, John won't find such a invitation today, so that has a thing. I would also highly recommend checking out his website as well, because he's an incredibly illustrious set of achievements spanning the media, law, and the arts. Then, sat to my far left, we have Dr. Emily Ryall, who is a senior lecturer in philosophy at the University of Gloucestershire, specialising in the ethics of philosophy in sport, especially performance enhancement. An active participant as well as a thinker, she has played rugby at international level and reenacted Monty Python's Philosopher's Football Match for the Philosophy Show, which organises philosophy discussions in schools.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, we have on my far right, Jeff Kidder, who you may have seen chairing the previous 2 sessions in this round. He's also director of membership and events at the Institute of Ideas. As well as being pretty much responsible for keeping Institute running on a day-to-day level with his organisation that announced and festival. We find Stan to be the convener of the IOI Book Club and our resident experts in all sporting matters. So I'm really delighted to have him speaking on the panel as well as just chairing for a change. So I'm looking forward to this session. But without much further ado, because there's a lot to try and get through, for your 3 minutes, but we'll be fairly strict on time. Just to make sure. One of the advantages of being a chair is that you get to amass a wonderful group of well-being intellectuals and you get to tell them to shut up, which I really quite indulge to. But please don't get us underway.
Well, I'll say I'm particularly intimidated by this 3 minute rule, so I shall crack on its way. Essentially, so I'm a sports engineer. I guess our business is trying to enhance athletes' performance by using engineering technology in its broadest sense. We're working extensively with UK sport and basically technologies from many different sports leading up to 2012. So it's a very active role as a practitioner involved in creating the technologies that we've been talking about. I guess my main point is that athletes have been always used lots and lots of different technologies to enhance themselves. That's really the nature of sport. It's about trying to get better than your opponent. It's about trying to enhance your performance. Enhancement per se is not really a big problem because we train, we use all sorts of techniques to gain an advantage over our competitors. I mean, athletes have always used the very best technologies that are available to them as well. Throughout history, we've always used the highest type of technology that they can access. And I guess the question that I'd like to try and delve into is there any sort of philosophical difference between the technologies that are banned and prescribed, the typical sort of doping type technologies, and those which are permissible? And what is the difference between those that are permitted and those that are banned? I guess I don't really understand why some are banned and those that are permitted. Governing bodies like WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, they have sort of made out some criteria about why they think a certain technology should be banned. You have to essentially meet two of these three criteria and then you're banned. I mean, we noticed later that really those reasons are very, very flaky indeed, and they're not very robust criteria. It does seem to be actually very arbitrary whether a technology is banned or not. And I guess that has led me to think there's really nothing intrinsically wrong with, say, doping, per se. There's no sort of great moral wrong in doing this. The only thing that's wrong about it is that it breaks the rules. Now, sports are defined by their rules, and if you break the rules, you make a mockery of the sporting test. So I guess my stance is, there's nothing wrong with it. The only thing that's wrong with it is because someone says you shouldn't do it. And if you do, you make a mockery of the sporting test. Now, I guess that's how I approach doping in terms of other types of technologies, things like swimsuits that are being banned, prosthetics, very aerodynamic bikes. I guess, where do we draw the line there? And again, technology being intrinsic to sport, I think we have to have technology in sport. We put breaks, certainly tend to talk about the dark ages. However, I think there is a line to be drawn. It's not. I don't think we should be thinking about whether this technology gives you an advantage over your competitor. What we should be thinking about is, does this technology give you an advantage over the sport? Does it actually change the nature of the sporting test so much so that that sort of sporting test has been corrupted in some way? So, should prosecutor stories be allowed to run against non-disabled athletes? Well, I don't think so, because I think that technology fundamentally changes the nature of the sport test. So I'll leave it
a lot are you packing to 3 minutes?
Yes, well, I think the question in many respects is where we start with this debate. Part of the debate will be to discuss perhaps what is fair, what does fairness mean? Because that's going to be a critical decision to make as to whether something is unfair. I've been listening to some of the debates this morning, the one before that Jeff was chairing, discussing the spirit of the Olympics, and some people had a very lofty view as far as the spirit of the Olympics were concerned, and that enhancement in that respect was against the spirit of the Olympics. It's right to say that the spirit of the Olympics was not as good as you may think. The important essence of Olympic sport then was a matter of honour and a matter of glory. Those were the words used in the context of the ancient Olympics. Nothing to do with fairness. It was all to do with winning. And the business of, it's all better to take part, it's the importance of taking part that counts. Well, it's like applying that, in my view, to the gladiatorial arena. You say to a gladiator, well, the importance is taking part. As long as you've taken part, that's okay. You can see immediately, using that analogy, it doesn't hold. So we need to discuss, I think, today, what do we mean by fair? Because the modern consideration and interpretation of fairness goes back to the 19th century, it's relatively recent. And fairness in sport was developed in the 19th century as a result of making sure that the betting arena was fair. The modern concepts of fairness in the 19th century developed so that when people bet on sport, they could bet from an even playing field. And so again, when we consider fairness and how we apply it, let's be realistic about that. My argument would be that as far as enhancement is concerned, that the important thing here is transparency. That if there is performance enhancement, it should be transparent. And I have a few suggestions to make in due course during our discussion as to how that can be achieved. But enhancement has taken place and continues to take place. And of course, as you said yourself, it's not just drugs. What is wrong, for instance, with the golf club, which is so technically enhanced that it makes the golfer commit a far better stroke than he or she would perhaps execute without a particularly mechanised, enhanced golf club. Consider the Grand Prix racing as well. There's actually a constructor's title there, whereby cars are put on the racetrack and often win Grand Prix. And one of the arguments made against motor racing is that it's a foregone conclusion who might win it, not because of the skill of the driver, but because of the car itself. I say, again, as long as that is transparent, and as long as people know exactly what is being done, either to the car or with the individual, then that is perfectly permissible. What drives, in conclusion, athletes in any event to enhancing their performance? Perhaps another issue we can discuss today. And that is particularly political and difficult topic. I would suggest, as I conclude my 3 minutes, no, they're my 4 minutes, I'm sure about performance enhancement to get the 3 minutes done, but, so I'm just slightly going over here. But I would suggest we talk about what is it that forces athletes to push themselves to these limits and beyond, and I'll posit one, commercial sponsorship. These are the areas I'd like to raise.
Emily.
Okay, can you hear me? I'm going to claim that linear performance sports, so those sports that are traditionally associated with the Olympics, such as running, jumping, throwing and swimming, I'm going to claim that those kind of sports are becoming increasingly untenable with advancements in technology and the way that they're applied to sport and their application to the athletes themselves. So, whilst athletes aim to gain a competitive edge or advantage by utilising whatever method, and sometimes these are illegal methods, that they can get fined, sporting authorities are consistently faced with new and innovative forms of technology which they have to decide if they're acceptable or unacceptable to that sport in question. And sometimes, as in the case of the fast-skin swimming costume, sometimes the governing bodies can find themselves in quite an embarrassing position, whereby in the 2009 World Championships, 9 out of 13 world records were broken in that single championship by athletes that were wearing the fast-skin swimming costume. And we've also seen the case of Oscar Pistorius and his wranglings with the IAAF about whether his blades provide him with an advantage that is unfair or not. So those types of cases, I think, are going to become increasingly common, and I think are going to give sporting authorities greater headaches about what technologies to allow or not to allow. So what it means is that we're going to have to reassess what is really valuable and important in sports. Testing who is the fastest runner or the greatest jumper is going to become meaningless as technology affects us as humans, and this might be outside of the sporting world. So, if we start to have technological enhancements in other aspects of our lives, it's going to affect what is important in sport. So I think that we're going to start to question the value of certain sports and perhaps see more aesthetic sports as being more valuable than those linear performance sports. So aesthetic sports, obviously, gymnastics, diving, dance, and those sports that involve more complex skills. Those sports that are measured, the success is measured on creativity, on imagination, on beauty. I think those sports are the ones that are really going to come to the forefront over the next 40 years as technology develops. And I think this myth of testing the natural capacities of the athletes is going to become apparent.
Okay, so then Jeff.
Okay. For myself today and a number of other people, we've been putting together this series of debates going on today. And the one thing that's made me really angry in sport in the last 6 months, the one incident, was at the World Athletics Championships in Korea back in August. And you could say, well, it's got nothing to do with drugs, it's got nothing to do with bionics. But to me it has, and it was the Usain Bolt false start. And you have a situation where you've got the greatest athlete in the world. The whole world is watching him. He is the fastest man in the world. He's pushed the boundaries. He's got a huge audience. And for me, as we discussed a bit this morning, in terms of sport, and particularly in terms of track and field athletics, that sense of human achievement, going faster, higher, stronger, whatever, that is to me the essence of sport and the essence of human achievement. You can both identify with this person, even though he's doing something exceptional that you can never do. And you have a situation where, yes, he false started, but they've developed this technology to such a level that they can detect. He did do a proper false start, but he only gets one false start. And they've now developed the false start mechanism that even with a twitch, you can be disqualified. And my problem with this whole way that technology and these new developments are being used is rather than being used in this instance to enhance the athlete, to allow them to perform, it's just used as a punitive measure, in this instance to disqualify them, to prevent the world from watching a great athlete. What was achieved in humanity by banning him with this false start regulation is a mystery to me, and probably a mystery to the rest of the world. And we have a situation now where athletics at one time, you can debate, we debated this morning, is there more to athletics than just being the fastest, the best, and just winning? We can have a debate about participation, competitiveness, and its role, and there's perfectly legitimate arguments to be had. But we have a situation now where, in the world of WADA and anti-doping, you have a system of athletics that are being cleaned, which now trumps excellence. And the whole way, basically, you have to be clean before you can do anything. To me, it is very problematic in terms of what athletics should be about, and that's taken to the fore in the whole whereabouts system, where you would be infringement of civil liberties in my view, to any other walk of life would be highly criticised. You have to tell people an hour every single day where you will be, and if you complain about it or do anything about it, you're immediately under suspicion. So my problem with the whole mechanism of the way things are done, I don't have a problem with the technology, I don't have a problem per se with performance enhancement and drugs. There's nuances we can negotiate within that. I'm not saying everything's great or everything's not. But the way that it's used as a punitive measure against the athletes, I find very problematic.
Okay, thanks to all the panelists. A lot of interesting strands of thought that may come out from that. So I'm going to put some questions and treat it kind of quite conversation with the panel. So feel free to jump in or talk over each other and just try to manage this anyway. But for me, the one thing that I was thinking in terms of the pragmatic level of trying to police these sports is most people talk about the extent how hard, how much effort they have to put in punitive, and they're going to have this increasing struggle to manage people. But I kind of think, about something on the other side, in the way in which you have this, so much hinges on significance financially influencing football. What is bafflingly difficult to enforce and impose rule of which has a loose rationality to it, but it is essentially a kind of slightly incoherent and arbitrary rule to an outsider. And people, nobody actually wants to overthrow the offside. You could change the game of football easily without people. But is it necessarily detrimental to the sport? To the sport that people will accept you impose arbitrary limits? Isn't there an aspect of accepting the sport is achieving success through certain?
Well, I think the question is, why are they imposing these limits? At the moment, it's very difficult to nail down whether there's any central ethic as far as fairness is concerned in sport. There's nothing written down in any document, for instance, you might be surprised to hear, as to exactly what fairness is. These are all notions which we've grown up and developed, as I said in my introduction, most recently. And so fairness is a thing which we feel we can morally identify, for instance, it makes us feel good to say this is unfair, therefore we're going to castigate the individual who, on the face of it, has been unfair. But the question is, and I pose the question, and I'm rhetorically answer it, subject to discussion, that is, what is wrong with enhancing your performance to win a race, to win a game, or to win a match? And in my view, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
There isn't anything wrong. That's, if enhancing your performance was wrong, why would we allow there to be 35-degree courses in sports science in the country? It was all about enhancing athlete performance. We accepted it. There were times when we didn't accept it. If you go back to the 1930s, the idea that you trained to compete was, that was horrific. That was a moral outrage. How dare you train? You need to just turn up and run in a natural condition. Doing some sort of using technology which doesn't have to grow. It can be knowledge, know-how. Doing things like different techniques and technology. The same arguments were had as we're having today about, well, should be allowed swimmers to use swimsuits or other types of technology. This argument's been going on for a long time.
And isn't it hypocritical, I think, sometimes for people to argue there shouldn't be enhancement, there shouldn't be performance enhancement, when the whole of UK sport is enhanced. I'll tell you why I'm saying it to you. The whole of US sport is enhanced in compared to comparison to other countries, because they got the sponsorship, they can afford to train their athletes 24 hours, peacefully, not quite, a day. But nonetheless 7 days a week, all year, full-time athletes, because, say, US teams and UK teams have more money compared to, say, other countries that cannot afford to pay their athletes, or train their athletes, or provide them with a whole raft of nutritional experts, psychological experts, trainers. This, in many respects, is performance enhancement. And so when we're discussing it, if there is an argument, and there are arguments against performance enhancement, let's not be hypocritical about it.
I think this is very much the area we work in, and we know that, as technologists and engineers, we can make very small differences to an athlete's performance that are sometimes critical. So we're talking about the hundredths of seconds that we can show.
0.7 seconds on the epilation of hairs.
And sometimes these differences are really important and they can make a difference between men or not. However, if you don't have the access to training, if you can't even get your athlete to provide them with the opportunity to get there, then you're nowhere at all. The much greater enhancement is about the sporting infrastructure that the country has. That you plan countless millions into achieve.
I suppose that the aspect of this, and that's going to be interesting about these races, because they are still notional, they're not kind of trying to formulate any specific fairness with this sport. But I do think of Rocky IV, in terms of that classic, there is that kind of classic, one of the Rocky films are kind of great insight into the sports mentality, in a certain way, that was successful. You classically have the scene where you have the Soviet Union boxer,
Kolo Toure,
the feats one boxer, and then you have Rocky who goes off and trains in the forest and snow. It's the same level, kind of much harder, gritty and passionate. I'm not going to suggest that that's not a viable form for in real life. You probably get crashed quite easily by but there is that kind of aspect of when we recognise the human element what we're doing. So it does seem to be something which diminishes that kind of human element. So we have no problem with talking for training. That's very different than allowing to.
So it's not naturalness, isn't it? We like to believe that these achievements are natural achievements, and people talk about the virtuous perfection of natural skills. So naturalness and sports and that is something that we really like to aspire to. However, I think we have to be realistic here and just look at what is natural and what isn't natural. Wearing a set of glasses isn't natural. Living to 80 isn't particularly natural. Right from year dot almost with sort of human evolution, we've engaged in technology in a very fundamental way. cooking our food through fire has fundamentally changed our physiology. We are technological animals. This idea of naturalness is something I think we kid ourselves.
It's not,
we don't live in a natural world.
it's not just naturalness, though, I agree with that. It's also an element of secrecy, which is why I touched in my opening on transparency. I think what a lot of people and commentators rail against is the covert nature of performance enhancement, the secrecy of performance enhancement, and not just the use of drugs, but the use of other methods as well. And so, for instance, if anyone that was using enhancement was obliged by codes of conduct, for instance, to declare what enhancement they used, to declare what drugs they'd taken, and I mean legal drugs, to declare everything they'd done to enhance their performance, so at least we could see, and their competitors could see, what they had done, and the matter was in the open. So I would say, yes, it is a matter of natural argument. It's also a matter of the concern that these methods should be performed in secret. And I say bring them out into the open and let's be realistic about it.
I think there's a... Sorry, Andy.
Well, this is two things. Firstly, we discussed this morning about politics and sport. Historically, you had empire and race, and then you had the Cold War. And to me, very crudely, after the East German scandals in the 80s, and the whole war on drugs, for want of a better word, became the way that sport has been organised internationally. So it's all, I agree with most of what's been said in terms of what the reality of the situation is. But the truth is that we have a big whole international paraphernalia, which is which is criticised, but not criticised in my way I see it centrally, which is the way the whole sport is organised through drugs, through anti-doping, and all the rest of that. The debate going on now is to try and get UK drug policy in line with the world drug policy. The whole thing works that way. I also think culturally there is a problem, and it's not black and white, but there is still an ambiguity which has changed in my lifetime about competitive sport. People make jokes about competitive sport not happening in schools, and we discussed this one year, and it's very patchy. Some schools have a lot of competitive sport, some places they don't. Some people are horrified by competitive sport, and it leads to these things, almost have prizes and all the rest of it. But overall out there, there's an ambiguity about winning and losing and the damage that can cause to children or generally. There's a debate now going on in the Midlands about whether to publish football results, but they've just lost it because the local council refused to publish all the football results because it's damaging to the children. They just lost that.
As a water sport, right? The banning of football results.
But there's a broad culture and an ease about competitiveness, winning and losing. And to me, if you had a stronger culture of winning, losing, excellence was the way forward in all these things, issues like drugs might fade into the background a bit. But because those cultural things are ambiguous, they're not black and white anymore. Somebody said this morning, so what about you saying, well, he runs fast, but a lot of people, that's very inspiring, which is good. But as long as that ambiguity exists, you have a feeling that drugs culture, the anti-drugs culture, and the anti-doping culture has a certain virtue, which if you had a stronger competitive ethic, it might fade into the background.
Yeah, I think Jeff is right in saying that there's political reasons for the way the sport's developed, and it'd be interesting to see in terms of your idea about transparency. Does that mean every country has to state exactly what finance they put behind all their athletes? I think I've seen Olympic medals maybe based on GDP figures, which are made very
who won it on that? I'm interested to know who came out.
India. But I mean, it also begs the question around therefore with international sport, I mean, in a way, why is it international sports that virtual character? So there is it does have that legacy of it being an aspect of nation state. So is there actually anything inherently wrong with the fact that a lot of the country can afford to train its athletes better? Is that not actually a symbol of the fact of the way in which it organises its society. I think. So
well, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm simply arguing that that is performance enhancement. And as you probably heard from I'm not against performance enhancement, but let's not get into criticism.
I think we have to be realistic here. I mean, if you argue for openness, and yes, you can make performance enhancements, but they need to be open and shared. I mean, I think we have to be realistic here because, I mean, fundamentally, if you take the case of what we do, so we're charged with, effectively enhancing performance, which I'm talking about, and we get our funding for it. Well, I'll tell you, that's top secret work.
Yes.
And because the people who want to benefit from that work are Team GB, you know, Team France, Team USA, or Team Australia. Why would UK Sport make that investment for other teams to get in? Now, if you say you have to be open, and you have to therefore share all this information, results, and ideas, you take away the incentive to make it.
I understand. But let me be clear what I mean by transparency. For instance, in any, let's call it for shorthand, that there be a clear record of what drugs actually is taken. There's absolutely no reason why that shouldn't be the case. In terms of any other form of enhancements, I wouldn't suggest a breach of patent or copyright. That's important. People have to maintain that. But at least the broad principle of whether they've got, for instance, a running shoe which is particularly enhanced in a broad particular way, or for instance, a tennis racket which is particularly designed to achieve a trajectory of the ball. I do understand what you're saying. In fact, as you were talking, it made me think you're probably in business beyond the Olympics, but I think the defence industry is probably interested in the sort of things that you're developing as well, because I know it's a different debate, but just suddenly struck me that performance enhancement is a sort of industry that might be across filtering into other aspects. But that's not a debate.
On behalf of that, I should say that all my speakers touting for defence contracts. I was giving the show. But I mean, sometimes they're not anything you end up replacing one set of problems with the other, with the transparency question. Because I mean, part of the, for me, one of the sort of stronger aspects of the problem of enforcement we have is that intrusion into athletes' lives. There's an incredibly rigorous test that have to go through. If people are competing against each other, they're still going to be having secret drugs that they go through. What's like a clear register of interest?
It's like a criminal law. You're going to pass a law, but you don't expect everyone to maintain the law. I often have this debate. Another area of work I'm involved in, I'm the president of the League Against Cruel Sports, which we helped draft the Hunting Act and push the Hunting Act through Parliament. It's often said to us, well, people still hunt. And we often say back, well, of course they do. Burglars still burgle despite the Theft Act. So in many respects, what I'm saying, your argument is, yes, of course people will try to avoid it. Whenever there is a rule, whenever there is a law, there is always going to be people that can try and break it. But at least we have a statement of intent. And I just conclude in our answer, for me, I go back to the point I made a moment ago. One of the important things here is that enhancement has this covert feel about it. We need to get rid of that. And that will actually legitimise, if I might say so, and properly legitimise it.
Where we were a little bit, I think what's the interesting question, I mean, is that it's still, to a degree, quite a minority view of it. Although it's the British stringent attitude around doping is routinely criticised by the community. So there is an aspect of people actually, spectators, who flock to the Olympics, a lot of times don't actually necessarily watch the sports that the Olympics the rest of the year round. They're all paying attention to there is a kind of more efficiency of drugs being used. In a way that there isn't in terms of other rules. It's not a kind of hard and fast rule. So it's not the kind of people are getting or that you could access some power. Why do you think that? So I mean, is there a danger of this? When the sport is something that people go to for various reasons, and they have to accept illogical and arbitrary rules, and it has a matter of requirements to sport function. I mean, is there anything in the entire room just to continue to regulate this?
I think I'll cut some chase and try and say how I think it should be managed, that sort of thing. I think basically what happens is each sport has its own community of followers, spectators, participants. They establish essentially what the values of that sport are. You could put the internal rules of that sport. Now, different sports have different cultures. Some sports are very high-tech, some sports are very low-tech. Some sports might be strictly anti-doping. Some sports might say, well, actually, doping is part of our culture and we accept that. What should happen is that the governing bodies of sport should reflect what those internal goods are with a set of rules which basically just reflect what those values are, to make sure everyone is playing the same game. However, this is my big caveat, at the moment what we have is organisations like WADA who are trying to impose a set of universal values and rules which are supposed to cross the whole wide spectrum of sport and say you've all got to play to the same game. Well, that's not true, because different sports are very different. And that's where
I think you mentioned the World Anti-Doping Authority in the issue. Let me just read out the three which you touched upon and just put them out amongst everyone else. In 1999, the World Anti-Doping Authority defined the offence of doping if the substance was 1, dangerous to health, 2, performance enhancing, or 3, antithetical, as they put it, to the spirit of thought of sport. Now, the first two were the effects of the drug on the user. The latter reason is effectively what behaviour the drug is likely to enhance. And those are the criteria we keep referring to, and I agree that they're very wide and are interpreted by each particular sports body. They get important, I agree. Is important.
Emily, is there any reflections on really why people still thrive in certain sports? I mean, in terms of your vision of the fact that something may well have to die off because of changes in society.
I think the reason why people support those sports is quite dull. So, 100 metres, sprint, who cares? I think the reason people support them is the hype that's associated with them. It's kind of self-perpetuated in the media, hypes it up, and people think they have to get involved in it, and they think it's important to watch, and therefore they kind of hype it up. I think it's the same with coaching football as well, in a sense. I think it's over hype. I don't think there's anything intrinsically interesting in seeing how fast people
I mean, do you think the audiences are that passive? I mean, is it just that, people say that Olympics is on telly, so people can watch it? I mean, it's slightly dismissive of fans.
It's also based on this myth that we are tested kind of the natural capacity of the human athlete, which is identified. It is a myth, this idea about the natural athlete. So I think those two strands, that's the reason why people
But don't you think, well, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, I mean, don't you think in the same way that we might have a debate to test our intellectual prowess or exams, but the Olympics and other athletics as well, test the physical prowess of people in terms of how fast they can run, how high they can jump, whatever it happens to be. And yes, it only lasts 10 seconds. And yes, as we were saying this morning, you think, wow, that's amazing. It doesn't change your life watching Usain Bolt. But the fact that somebody could do something quite exceptional like that is an inspiring thing. It shows what humanity can do. In the same way that in other areas of life, people develop some life-saving mechanisms show a different aspect of human excellence. Surely, in terms of sporting and physical excellence, it's the equivalent. How fast you can run, how high you can jump, and how good you are at various.
But it doesn't mean that you can't be assisted by legal drugs, because using your analogy of the individual taking exams, an individual may take exams by taking dextrose tablets to give them energy and to keep them awake.
I think there's an issue that you have, to have the rules and have one or two people subverting it. I'm not sure about the transparency thing, but having people subverting it is a problem. But to me, the rules as they are, and the whole paraphernalia, which is an international phenomenon, it is also a problem. So if that was the solution, well, we wouldn't start from here. But it's that is a difficult problem. But I do think that the idea of human excellence is something that I would want to keep physical excellence and achievement in the same way that we do other countries achieve. To me, it's just part of humanity. And the fact that people, however cynical some people are about the Olympics, varies. The fact that people will watch the 100 metres is because they think, wow, that's amazing. Or they watch the high jump, they think, wow, that's amazing. And that seems to bring an audience.
Yeah, I'm going to go out to the audience now. arm raised there, the white shirt there, no take back, no.
Hi, you touched on this already, that sport is pretty arbitrary. You know, rules of sport are arbitrary, and sports themselves are arbitrary. And if you were to give a bunch of kids a football and a small space in which to play, they would very, very quickly come up with a game and a set of rules. So, I think what I'd like to ask the panel is, do you feel that there is perhaps a set of rules inside the human brain, a set of ethical rules which you can actually put some scenarios to people and people would say, yes, I do agree with that, that's not cheating, I agree with that, that is cheating. So do you feel there's a set of rules that people perhaps have where they can say that these, you know, what is enhancing sport?
That's a great question. I'll just take the chap over there as well, and then turn the back there.
Hi. So my question is, we're all debating Olympics, but as a top performance, well, set of a bunch of sports. But could this debate and principles be applied for Paralympics, for instance, where having the human limitation itself is actually what defines the sports category? And just one other point, like you guys were talking about systems and even a structure in place to, you know, as some sort of sports enhancement. And did you guys see the 1992 NBA Olympics, well, the Olympics in Barcelona, having the NBA players as some sort of cheating, like they won by, well, double the points of everyone else?
Okay, yeah, two questions, so feel free to jump in and answer.
Well, I'll pick up some of them. Firstly, the issue about is it something hardwired. In fact, we always come back to them in the human psyche. It goes back, perhaps, to begin with, be as succinct as I can, to what I said in my introduction, which is what is fair. If you'd have asked that question at different times and different periods of history, you would have definitely got different answers as far as that's concerned. If you'd have asked that question during the early Olympics in ancient Greece, you've got the answer that honour and glory was the important thing. And fairness didn't really matter. It's interesting to know that in the ancient Olympics, in the boxing arena, there were no weight differences. So effectively, again, back to the spirit of the Olympic argument, if you want to talk about the real spirit of the Olympics, Olympic boxing in ancient Greece, there were no weight restrictions.
They don't have height differences in either.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah. I mean, I've got to be consistent with my argument. I could say I agree. But what I'm really saying is, in ancient times, dealing with your question, fairness wasn't considered as we considered fairness. Fairness then, as I touched upon in the 19th century, became fairness if people wanted to bet on sport. So that effectively, if you were to bet on sport, you knew that you had an even playing field to bet on. Now we're getting more cuddly about fairness and the level playing field. The level playing field, of course, doesn't exist, like the reasons I spoke about the UK and the US sponsorship and the money going into US UK sports compared to other countries. But there is, I suppose, a philosophical knee-jerk response from people in the 21st century of fair play and fairness, and I suppose they would develop that sense. But I would also suggest that kick into the primeval instinct of winning. And I think there still is that primeval drive to win, and to win well, and to achieve, and there's another word we haven't used actually, and that's recognition. One of the other drivers, that there has been psychological research on athletes, for instance, as to why they don't, as to why they do performance enhancement. And two things came out of that. One was the will to win, the need to win, but the other one was the need to gain recognition. And that didn't necessarily include winning. So yes, people will hardwire on fairness depending on what culture and what time in life you live. But I would suspect that it will always be overridden by the will to win and the will to obtain recognition. I can deal with some other questions. But
just very quickly, I don't think we have this sort of like a natural sort of revulsion to enhancement. I think our attitudes towards it probably reflect reflect what happens in broader society. So, you know, in 100 years' time, it might be totally natural for us to have all sorts of cognitive enhancements, to be living 50 years longer, to have maybe sort of all sorts of bits of bioengineering, implants, all sorts of things might be considered the norm, and therefore they will then become the norm in sport. Absolutely. So, you know, if you give people a set of these, you know, a set of tools to go and create a game, I think they'll create. I think they could create all sorts of different games. I don't think there's anything hard about it. It just reflects what's happening in our lives.
On that second book, which I think leads to your question about, you know, the influence and the effect on the Paralympics. I think it's going to be a really interesting debate that plays out in a few years' time, whereby prosthetic enhancements, bionics, will become so advanced that they will be better than our kind of natural capacities. In which case, as I sort of said in my introduction, it might become normal to enhance yourself just as a human being, which then will play out of, you know, what it means for sport. Because, you know, at the moment there's a debate about steroids, blades. I can imagine it won't be too far in the future whereby Paralympic athletes will be running faster than able-bodied athletes. What happens then in the Olympics? Do the IOC then say, oh well, we'll have to separate them again and make sure that, you know, in which case the performances we see in the Paralympics will surpass over the able-bodied Olympics, and perhaps reduce the influence of them. But if it becomes normal to have those kind of advancements, so able-bodied athletes chop their legs off or have implants or whatever else, in order to create what is now considered the Paralympics, I mean, it raises really all sorts of conceptual questions about, you know, what are we actually testing.
Well, I've heard ambition, or I've heard ambition as I said, far as chopping your legs off. But one thing that I was impressed, David said right at the start of this, and I tend to subscribe to something you heard him say, is that I think that the dividing line must be, and I agree, whether the sport itself is transgressed rather than the individual. And I've been struggling with the blade debate, and I think that for me would be a way through.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's all sorts of reasons why we have all these like heightened states of emotions around the disability sport. One of these last two Paralympic Games, I'm a huge supporter of disability sport. But I think you have to ask yourself, okay, is this gaining advantage over the sports? Is this, you know, we don't let marathon wheelchair athletes compete against marathon runners. You know, we wouldn't let you know, in 400 metres, we wouldn't let someone do a set of rollerblades, because it's basically a different test. It's fundamentally a different sort of test. And I mean, the grey area in this instance, when we're talking about athletes or historians, is it the same sporting test? Well, you know, I've been able to look into the science of it, and I say, well, actually, he's got a fundamentally different locomotion to other athletes, therefore.
And in terms of Paralympics, discussing the Paralympics, isn't the other aspect of this that a lot of the innovations there are enabling innovations, rather than necessarily performance enhancing?
Although you know, you can change if you're bilateral amputee, you can change your height, your gait, so your running height can be sort of your normal walking around height. But fundamentally, you know, the problem with you know, these very high level technology and prosthetics is, you know, our muscle and bone is not optimised for doing the 400 metres or the 100 metres or the marathon or whatever it is. We don't have to do jack ball trains. However, with engineering, you can optimise a specific, you know, limb to do this specific task. So you know, it just brings in this really kind of connection.
So I suppose the point of the sentence is that that's the whole point of doing the 400 metres, because they're not optimised to suit that task, and transforming something to doing the local roads is part of the challenge in a way. But Jeff,
yeah, I mean, these things are socially determined. I was reading Jamie Hampton's book on the 1948 Olympics, and the first week was really hot, the second week was really wet. But the main point is that during the whole week, they did the longer races. And on some of the races, over half the people, half the athletes collapsed due to dehydration, because they had no idea that it might be an idea to drink water or to intake water, or anything to do with fluids. That was completely alien. I'm not sure maybe David doesn't know where that came in, but you know, there were things which now will be so obvious and true, which socially it just didn't fit in. You know, you had a bit of honey or sugar or something like that, you thought that will do it. When you look back now and you think, God, isn't that primitive? But that's how society was in, you know, only 60 years ago. So I think there's the technological side of it, which people have looked at, David, and what is possible. And then there's also the way that societies use those things, what's socially acceptable and whatever. So there's certain things now which you do, which are basic training, which in the past you didn't have. Again, as we discussed this morning, the Rebecca Jenkins in 1908 and things, when the Americans came over, having done training, that was considered a horror to the British. And they thought it was disgusting that they could, Americans had these muscles, they'd been in gyms and all the rest of it. And the English gentlemen looked down their noses and thought, how vulgar are these people? And the way the British responded was to have their officials try and get the Americans disqualified in as many events as possible. So there's a whole load of things, which is the technological side of it, and then what it says about society in terms of how the Olympics work and what is reality. My favourite anecdote was the 1896 Olympics. At the beginning, when the British did everything so that only basically elite, the aristocrats could take part. And they basically lost every argument. People said, no, as long as people are not professional, which is a problem in itself, as long as people are professional, they can take part. The British were so aghast by it. Their final ultimatum is, okay, we'll do that, but nobody who's a manual worker be allowed to take part. That was the British final demand, which again was rejected. And the British used that to basically show how inferior and disgusting the rest of the world was, that they'd even let ordinary people who did manual work take part in the Olympics. That was the definition of the British.
Well, fair.
And that's how society was then. So there's a technological side and there's a social side.
Well, fairness in sport has always been an unmovable feast, hasn't it? Not just with the Olympics. I call to mind the Bodyline series in cricket, when England, and again I've always been a supporter of Bodyline, I have to say, and I think it was perfectly appropriate that Harold Larwood bowled, sorry, no, Australians, perfectly acceptable that Harold Larwood bowled in such a way, and I think it was appalling the way John Dean, the captain of the streets, when he got back to England. That's another story. But the fact there was a bowling technique, for those of you who may not know what the hell I'm talking about. There was a bowling technique used by the England team to beat the almost invincible Australians in cricket in the 30s, and many people said that wasn't fair in the game where fairness is supposed to seep through every vein. But again, it goes back to your question at the back there about are people hardwired? Well, you couldn't say that there's more a hardwiring on the face of fairness than in the sport of cricket, but when the buck was down, when it was necessary to win the game, that hardwiring of fairness came to what I always feel will come to fruition, that is the will to win. And if the will to win means going to the boundaries of fairness, it always will do.
Okay, there are more questions that are coming in, so yeah, there's a chap just right there and then pass it forward.
Thinking up on something that John said earlier on about money possibly seen as performance enhancement in sport. Could it also be argued that, particularly in this country, money can kind of breed a culture of complacency among athletes, and especially in the likes of tennis, where we've been informed by nations like Serbia who have got much more funded in their sports. And there's a huge argument for the role of psychology of the athlete as a performance enhancement as opposed to more physiological methods.
Yes, I mean, yes, sorry, we
can just say yes.
Try to do that as much directly. Others will contribute. Yes, there is. Again, this links into the issues that I was raising about what is performance enhancement. Performance enhancement is just the sort of things that the tennis players which you've just described are getting. It's the sort of thing that our Olympic team, Team GB, is no doubt getting as we speak. Nutritional advice, psychological advice, and probably when we don't get the mental psychiatric advice. But yes, and this is all performance enhancement stuff. And as far as corporate involvement is concerned, it is a big issue. Again, I touched upon it in my introduction. The more money an entity has, the more time and effort and detail that they'll go into enhancement. And the question is, should there be an equalisation of money as far as that's concerned? Again, a different argument, but I'd probably say no.
So I think we might return to that, because I think there's a very good question. I'll just take this chap first.
Yeah, we've been talking about enhancements in sport, and I think there's three types of doping we can talk about: technological, financial, and traditional types of doping. In my opinion, the three things taken together, the traditional type of doping currently has such a big effect on performance that it's not as present in name, it's really shifting the boundaries. EPO had such a strong effect on cycling that it very nearly destroyed the sport in the 90s. So I think that certainly at the moment the debate should be that the drug side of things should be taken slightly differently from the other two.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of important. I think the two kind of tying together.
I like the question about money and athletes is quite interesting. I mean, I agree. Obviously, people are hungrier from Eastern Europe, from China, and the response of people in the West is to say, "Oh, look at them! They're basically farming their children to trade them, whatever." And you turn that on its head and say people in the West are soft and they don't have the hunger they used to have. There's an argument there both ways, both in athletics, obviously tennis most exceptional. The other thing I would say just on that, and about the 1908 Olympics again, 1908 Olympics was the first one where teams competed as nations, and Johnson made Team GB. Now my personal opinion is I am more inspired by Usain Bolt than I am by people from Team GB, and I'm more of the more traditional view. I'm not saying athletes necessarily compete as individuals as themselves, or from their city state they might have once done, but the national, these days it's kind of faux nationalism. It's not like it's not like the 1930s or anything. But I don't get motivated by that, whether they're British or French or whatever. If you see somebody who's exceptional and you think, wow, that is amazing. To me, it doesn't matter where they're from. I'm not really bothered by that. I do think that's an important.
Just one point in the Olympics, where I understand it is that you don't actually race under the flag. It's a media construct. In the Olympic rules, you race as an individual, not as a team. So the points tables, that's all done by the media. That's all in the Olympics. That's all the point.
Well, you have to the world though. You have the flags and the race and all the rest of it. All the party. And that's how it's social scene.
So it's part of what the Olympic lads. I mean, it's temporary being a media it's part of what the Olympics are.
I guess that probably started really in the Cold War when you had sort of this vying for sort of all sorts of nations competing against each other on the scales of this. Wars by proxy.
Well, I was just about to say that. I mean, that's often what sport is referred to. I remember a film many years ago called Rollerball, and anyone remembers that. I'm probably the only old enough one to remember that. It's a 1970s science fiction film where, quite frankly, there were no wars, and everything was decided by this rather brutal game of rollerball. I recommend check it out.
I just want to come back on the question. So, is there a difference? So you're going to split them out into three different types. I think the way. I understand why you want to do it. I think that's probably you probably obviously in the majority, I'm probably in the minority, saying that I don't see the difference. I guess really, if I follow your line of argument there, it's the magnitude of the enhancement that moves it into a different category. So as soon as this technique, this technology becomes so enhancing, maybe that somehow just that moves it into this class of doping.
Is that as soon as people realise actually it was shaving so much of the time that records were just falling and it made a mockery of the sport.
I don't see. I don't understand how that made a mockery of the sport.
Well, because it suddenly identified this idea about people's people swimming faster because they were training harder or their genes were better or that movement naturally happens. And then suddenly people realise actually it wasn't anything like that. It was the fact that they had particular sponsorship by a particular company that made it really and that's what gave them the record.
Yeah, no, it's not. Because particularly in FINA, there was a rule saying that all these suits had to be available for all athletes to compete in. They had change rooms full of these suits that any athlete could get into. The best swimmers would win in tournaments where there was just normal, sort of non-offensive suits. The best swimmers, the same swimmers would still win. It didn't really change the order. It just it broke record. But the history of sport's been catalogued for these things. Moving from sort of bamboo pole vaults to glass fibre pole vaults. solid wooden javelins to hollow javelins. We see step changes in performance. It's what keeps the sport alive. It allows us evolution, this idea that we can move forward in the sport. We shouldn't just pin things in history and say, this is now, so it's always got to be. The sport has always changed.
Can I go back to something you said to the gentleman that posed a question about drugs and whether how far it goes? I would put this out for debate. And in fact, if you are of the view that performance enhancement is appropriate, then you're of the view that performance enhancement is appropriate, and you do not necessarily quantify it then. Either as an approach, as an intellectual approach that you take it is right, it is right. It's not right up to a point. As a matter of principle, it's right. And then when it becomes wrong, it becomes a matter of morals. And that's perfectly legitimate. Let's recognise our thought processes. The principle must be right from A to Z. It becomes awkward from a moral perspective.
Well, I don't know whether I'm going to go on to agree with you, but perhaps one of the reasons why people often want to distinguish drugs from other parts of the performance enhancement is because they say, oh, it's harmful. We only have to look at those, East European athletes in the 1960s, and they're obviously, steroid and had huge effects on their health. And that's often the argument that's used against drugs in sport, because we as a community have a duty to protect athletes from themselves and doing crazy things with coercion and crazy coaches. And I think that's one of the reasons perhaps why it does want to be separated from other.
But the trouble with that is, that's why these three criteria which Ryder sort of imposed, the harm argument is a central pillar of that, and yet we allow harms in so many other aspects of society, particularly in the pursuit of elite sport. To be an elite athlete, we hold it up and think that's a wonderful, healthy thing. If you want to be an elite 10k runner, you have to be something like, this is male elite 10k runner, something like 55 kilograms. That in itself is intrinsically unhealthy to pursue this. And we accept it and we celebrate it. We accept harms in sport across the board. Girls, teenage girls falling off horses, you name it. Loads of people get hurt through the pursuit of sport. And we're fine.
But you speak to any professional footballer who's retired, who's now in his 40s or 50s, and he's probably hobbling with arthritis. So again, the very participation in intensive professional sport is probably most unhealthy.
Can I add something in terms of the harms? My argument is not so much about the harms, because I agree with what scientists said about essentially harming yourself in terms of the conditioning. But what I think that I like to see is when I go and watch an athlete compete is a mixture between their genetic makeup and training that they've done. When you have a drug, the effect of the drug seems to be so strong that it's the person's basic essentially the person who's going to win is the person who best responds to the drug, rather than the person who is best at that particular sport. And that's where I think it comes down to how much can affect that particular person.
But to me, shouldn't it be? Emily made the point about East Germany, and it seems to me it's one that, yes, you say the health of the athlete must be a consideration. With David's rider, which I agree that a lot of these things are inherently very unhealthy, and you make a decision to do them. But with a situation in East Germany where you basically turned men into women, where you did these things which were really extreme over a long period, it's like a farming system, where you basically gave people, you tell them what they were, you had people had long-term physical, psychological damage. That's one thing, and that's obviously absolutely horrendous what happened in East Germany, but that has happened, and that's now being used to prevent what, to most people, would be fairly minor. You might have a very little. Everyone's saying the definition of the term harm of the athlete used to mean irretrievable physical change or something like that. Now, something that might have a minor effect on you for a short time might have a particular effect in later life if you're a professional sportsman of some kind. Is now being used to start
we have doping policy, which is essentially established off the back of Tommy Simpson keeling over in the games. The doping policy is based on these instances. It just doesn't make sense. I'm not saying that they don't think it's great, we should all go and do it, but I think if we're not going to do it, we're going to find some better reasons as to why we don't do it. If you've got people like Jacques, president of the IOC, saying, well, it's absolutely fine for surgeons to use beating. This is their performance in surgery, and that's fine. What's the reason why we don't allow shooters or archers to use it? I think we just have to, if there are reasons, we just got to get better reasons.
And it goes back to my transparency point. Sorry to get harping on about this, but in many respects, if there is a transparency of the drugs that are being taken, to a degree, it protects people. The point that was made by last question, and the point I think has been made by Jeff, it will protect people from the more extreme ends of abuse.
But I mean, I think also, because I think that's also an aspect of the health. I think Matthew Side has made the point quite strongly, is that if you were actually looking to regulate the health of the drugs people were taking, the current rules simply don't do that because they're encouraged to be. You'll be secretives around use the drug which can't be protected, which is always much less regulated.
It's a secret aspect.
You're not going to get protected for using a drug that's be registered and tested. Yeah, so the health sort of question. Unfortunately, talking about the worst, not the worst abuse of the Soviet Union or East Germany extension. And that's like, but there is still the actual small question, which, because I mean, you're trying to do very well as an engineer in this regard, and at the same time there is that aspect of the funds to reduce the certain players being able to outperform wealthier nations and that's a sort of psychological performance. I mean, that is the kind of thing that attracts people to sport. The fact that actually the people with the best resources, the best performance enhancing technologies can't actually win. So that seems to be an important aspect of what keeps bringing people back to the sport. Formula One, for example, had a lot of essentially working incredibly hard to try and regulate its technological components. The fact that it's the cars are just taking into a wonderful recession.
But isn't performance
they needed to try and bring in?
But performance enhancement just could be just another word for training. It's for good training and good preparation. Isn't that? Aren't we really boiling down? That's what performance enhancement is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. People always bring out Formula 1 example. It's how terrible. The point is, Formula 1 is a hugely popular sport, and the internal goods of Formula 1 say technology is great. We love it. We absolutely love it. Now, and it's not harmed through that. And you have
you've got a constructor's type. They make that a merit.
I mean, who cares about the actual constructor's type of that? I mean, if you're engaging in a people care about the driving.
They celebrate it. It's actually part of it.
But it's still limited to technology that can be used because Formula 1 got so boring.
And they limited it, and they were able to limit it because of transparency. Because the constructors were obliged to say what they were doing.
You don't have to have ubiquitous set of rules that every sport has to sign up to. Different sports can have different internal goods, different values, different things that they want their sport to do. They're the ones that care about it. We don't have to have a universal set of values.
But that's the status quo. That's the status quo. That's where we are at the moment. The different sports have different regulations, and what's more, as I said at the top of the debate, there's no actual thing that sports law. Everyone refers to sports law. In fact, there's actually no central tenet to sports law. It doesn't exist. It's simply an amalgam of regulatory decisions made by different sporting bodies. And so there is this ad hoc development of sports regulation. And so you've got already what you want.
Well, I guess the only problem with that is when you then have bodies like the World Anti-Doping Agency looking for this homogenous set of sort of values that they expose in all sports. You have to sign up if you want to be in them. You have to sign up. You have to sign up to a certain set of principles. Just in 2007 there was the ban use of like boxing.
But they're often so nebulous.
All sorts of things.
But the one thing that it's still the kind of question of cheating. Cheating has a kind of sort of movement and performance. There actually are some athletes on the ground. We're on secretly doping or taking part. It's not is it just entirely naive to just to expect that professional sports people may actually still have a sense of know-all and actually
I think it's actually the other way around, and you made a remark at the start, and I wrote it down somewhere. It's about that, how, I guess, the prevalence of doping. We assume that doping is incredibly prevalent, everyone's up to it, and You know, the 2012 Olympics have been more open than they've ever been before. In fact, we've been looking at the performance data for this, looking at, and we can clearly identify trends in historic data where clearly performances have been low. And you look at data really from sort of 1989, where widespread doping tests were brought in, and we're not seeing any effects, anything like what we had in the 80s and 70s, which then leads us to believe that there might be doping going on, but it's nowhere near what was happening.
But can I go back to something you said? Can I go back to something you said about honour? That's an interesting word. What does that mean? I mean, are you honourable if you don't use all the techniques you possibly legally use to enhance your performance, to obtain recognition, to win games, to win races? I don't think there's anything honourable about not doing absolutely everything you can legally to excel.
Well, there's the thing, say with 100 metres, the great thing about 100 metres, or the 400, and this is true, it's simple, it's run across 100 metres. But it's a universal thing, you can do it in England, you can do it in Africa, you don't need a lot of money to do it, all that. And the same, there's high jumping, yes, you have the infrastructure if you're training in the West, you can call that form of doping, if you like, I wouldn't, but you have that. And it's in terms of cheating, maybe there's ways you can cheat in 100 metres, you can false start or various things, but at the same time, it's very simple and straightforwardly, it's very simple action that anybody can do, which is what means so many people identify with it. And I think that's the advantage of something like 100 metres, or 400 metres, or high jump, or whatever, as opposed to other events where you have to, where it depends on subjective judgment and marking and all the rest of it. I also think Formula One thing is interesting because there's very few sports which are, and I would defend it, even though it can seem boring, there's very few sports which you can really say are genuinely world sports. And obviously athletics is to a degree, world football is to a degree, but you look at the Rugby World Cup, obviously it's different, right? So a few things are, Formula One is one of the few things which to me, yes it doesn't appeal maybe to everybody, but it's pretty much a world sport with huge followings everywhere, which is hugely, yes, driving is very important, but it also depends a lot on the technology. And it is much maligned by people, partly because there's a thing about fast cars and all the rest of it. And the inclination, one to point out that there's a major sport all over the world, and Bernie Eccles can go almost anywhere, set one up and it'll have a big following, whether people like that or not. But also the fact, because of the technology, people like it as much because of that, and the Ferrari and all the rest of it, as they do because of the driver, which is important. So I think you do have to recognise that that's the case.
Okay, can I add any more questions? Yeah, okay, Ashley, right.
Yes, my question is that recently we've seen technology introduced in sports like tennis with the use of Hawkeye, and we've got the screens in the rugby league, things like that. But football still resisted the goal line technology. Now, bearing in mind there's huge pressure from the Football Association and even big broadcasters like Sky Sports to bring in this technology, Sepp Blatter won't bring it in. I want the panel's opinion. Is Sepp Blatter wrong in his approach to goal line technology?
I think that Sepp Blatter, he has capitulated slightly in it was really interesting. I don't know if you read on the FIFA website, Sepp Blatter came up with 7 reasons, 8 reasons why goal line technology should not be allowed. There were traditional reasons, as you know, about the fact that it will undermine referees' authority, and it means that fans won't have any debate in the pub and that kind of thing. But there's been so much pressure upon him that now you probably know that there is testing going on, which will be pushed back, I think, the results are going to be in February, to try and facilitate goal line technology. Because I think he's realised that there's been so much pressure because people want to see fair games just outlined. The idea that if a goal goes over the goal line, it can therefore be counted and not just discretionary whether the referee saw it or not.
But, I mean, Jeff, you began with an example from say Bowden, the excessive use of video technology for you entirely happy with the use of goal line technology?
No, you made a point earlier about the offside rule, but to me, yeah, it can ruin a particular game if a goal is given or given, something like that happens. So that's ruined the game. But like the England-Germany game in the World Cup last year. Maybe it didn't change the score, but obviously, you know, it was a bit of a combat that they didn't allow that goal without the goal line technology. But my personal opinion on that level, as opposed to 100 meters, 100 meters is about who's the fastest man in the world. If you have something which tries to prevent that happening or to clamp down on that, as I sort of see, that's a particular problem. In terms of football, we're looking at the culture. I think you have to look at all these examples in their own terms rather than have a blanket rule. I think in relation to football, part of the game is arguing about was that offside, what was that a goal, was that this, that, and the other. And to me, to bring in goal line technology, I don't have a strong view one way or the other, but it's, if you have an argument, I scored Bristol City, they scored, Crystal Palace scored that goal with the other year with Freddie Sears, who went to hit the stanchion, came out, the referee didn't give it. I thought that was really funny. David Palace fan, he thought it was great. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. That's just all that's kind of I can't really get worked up in it. And I think if people do get too worked up in it, maybe they should calm down a bit and just say, it's only a game.
I would be more interested in making referees have performance enhancing drugs, quite frankly, than goal line technology. Yeah, I mean, I would be in favour of goal line technology, quite frankly. There's no harm in it. It makes sure that if the skill of a particular athlete has determined that they have scored a goal, why should they be deprived of it? But on the point of performance enhancement, which is the debate we're having today, performance enhancement, of course, is an interesting aspect in terms of officials as well. We haven't touched upon that yet. I would have no criticism, for instance, of officials having performance enhancement, either optically, and I'm not being flippant actually, optically, or indeed in terms of energy preserving. And I'm not sure, I don't know, do you know, is there any research taking place into performance enhancement of officials?
Well, I'm not sure they banned from taking it, they have to say banned.
Why now? I mean, obviously they wouldn't be allowed to take an illegal.
No, I'm not saying
for instance, we had home wear in our hypoxic chamber, training before we went out to the World Cup. So it kind of happens already. Okay. I mean, just find out. There's one good argument, I think, against goal line technology. I'm sure it will be introduced at some point. And the problem is this idea, we mentioned it before, this idea that you can relate to these athletes in some way because you're kind of blind. And the trouble is, if you have one set of technology which is put onto the World Cup, the Premiership, okay, it's going to be expensive, and then the Championship have to have it, then what about the lower leagues, and what about, the sort of the clubs that just only just about what they're standing at, they have to get this thing. What about clubs?
Rugby, is it? Rugby, they have it at the highest level, they don't have it,
Yeah, I guess the point, the concern is that you further remove this thing from the everyman sport.
Competition zone. Competition zone.
I think I'm sure.
Okay, and do we have any final points? You had your hand up again.
Yeah, come on, we'll talk about that. Okay, that's fine. I'm going back to this idea of fairness, and I was thinking that you were saying to me that if Usain Bolt was found to have been taking drugs, it would be absolute uproar across the world. People universally would probably decry that as being one of the worst cheats ever. And in fact, almost worse than, say, being a murderer or something. He would absolutely be put upon for being the worst cheat ever, for taking something that actually doesn't affect many people in a direct way, as, say, a murder or something really horrendous does. So it implies to me that there is a universal idea of what is fair and what is not fair, back to what which is honesty and clarity of what is and what is not.
I agree with that, with what you've said, and I never should go into the time, I don't take time, but I'll say there's also another issue here as well. It's the hypocrisy of society generally. People put other people on pedestals and like to knock them down. And if Bolt was, hypothetically, he wasn't, let's make that very clear. But in this hypothetical example, people probably take great pleasure in some anti-moralistic sort of way of criticising and bringing down other people. It seems to be something in the psyche of doing it. So the problem isn't really in the fairness within the sport. The problem, I would suggest, is generally in society's attitude. of needing to attack icons.
Is anybody have anything final that they want to add from the panel before I bring to the
I mean, that's a very good question, and that is, you almost fear watching sport these days. You see something great, and you think there'll be either people rooting away or something will happen to bring them down. I mean, you know, whether you say that comes from the media or from all, I don't think that's the thing. I think it's a bit of a culture we have, but that is a real danger. Even when you see something really amazing, there's a lot of people out there who either don't believe it, don't trust it, are very suspicious of it, and are only waiting for that person to be brought down.
Well,
and that, to me, that is very...
Takes some iron done, right?
Yeah, but there are individuals historically where that's been the case. And I think compared to the past, when East German thing was going on, obviously some people knew, but lots of people didn't know, it wasn't a big thing. And obviously that could have been done with being exposed. But now you have a situation where people are much more suspicious of each other, much more suspicious of people in the celebrity culture, and a lot of suspicion undermining them, bringing them down or whatever. And I have a problem with that. Because when people have done something wrong, fair enough. But I also think when people have done something great, you should celebrate it and not think, but tomorrow they're going to come down. And I think that worry that guys raised over there is quite a good assessment of the world.
Okay, can we thank the panel for